This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. It's tax season, and we're all a bit tired of numbers. But here's one you need to hear. $16.5 billion. That's how much the IRS flagged for possible identity fraud last year. Now here's a good number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it. Guaranteed. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
And movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew. As always, that's absolutely everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast is, as the title gives it away really, we're here to talk of the stories of films, and I tend to talk about development, I talk about production, the making of films, just those little moments that go to make the films that we know and sometimes love, just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. Now, every now and then I have a special episode of Film Stories where I'm joined by a guest who talks to me about their film, and congratulations, you've landed on one of those, and it's very lovely to have you here. So for this particular episode, I'm focusing on a 2019 release, Motherless Brooklyn, directed by Edward Norton, written by Edward Norton as well, adapting the novel by Jonathan Lethem. Norton also produces and stars. Also in the cast of this one are Gugu Mbatha-Raw, Alec Baldwin's in there, Bobby Cannavale, Willem Dafoe, Bruce Willis, Cherry Jones. And the film is heading into cinemas on the day that this podcast is released. Now, the movie has been an elongated, really, labour of love for Norton, who's had it in his head, who's been developing the film for the best part of 20 years. In fact, as he was coming off Fight Club, this was a project that he was juggling at that point. He'd previously directed one movie, Keeping the Faith, and so we've been waiting a long time for the second time that he steps behind the camera. Thus, what's going to happen is I'm going to play you a clip from the movie. The other side of that, you'll then hear my conversation with Edward Norton, where he talks through the making of the film, the stories behind it, and his thoughts too on the future of cinema ownership as well. It's just a question I just threw in at the end. We recorded this when he was in London a week or two ago for the promotion of the movie. I think that's all you need to know in advance, short of the fact that I did actually really like the film. The interview starts at the other side of the clip, so I'm going to crack on and just play you that clip right now.
Okay, listen. I got something wrong with me. That's the first thing to know.
I got threads in my head. I got threads in my head, man.
I twitch and shout a lot. Makes me look like a damn freak show.
Can't you ever cut that out?
I'm sorry. Touch it, Bailey. I'm sorry.
But inside my head's an even bigger mess. I can't stop twisting things around, words and sounds especially. Have to keep playing with them until they come out right. Sorry.
Jeez, figured I asked.
Like I said, a damn mess.
Well, that was a clip from Motherless Brooklyn. I'm delighted to be joined by its writer, producer and director, Edward Norton. Good afternoon.
Good to see you.
I'm really fascinated that you got a film like this through the system now and today, because I followed the story of it. I've tried to read lots of interviews to see what you've answered already. Mm-hmm. But the one thing that's curious that I find curious is appreciating that this has been in your life for 20 years. I wonder, is there a more difficult year in those 20 years than now to release a film like this, to make a film like this, and to get a film through? Because I'm grateful to see it.
I think it's always been tough to make original adult films. Even in the era of like Midnight Cowboy and things where people talk about sort of a golden age, but they were still making movies like Paint Your Wagon, and lots of, they were making lots of like lowest common denominator dreck in that period too that nobody remembers, because of course those aren't the films you remember from that era. But there's always been these things always exist in parallel with each other, don't they? The impulse to make broadest common denominator commercial films as a financial proposition, and then the the people who, in the same general form of film narratives, are trying to make more challenging work that has emotional resonance, political resonance, like cultural resonance, like capture the generational moment, and those, I think, are always elusive. They're just always elusive, and they're hard to explain.
Yeah,
they are by definition, to use the phrase, execution dependent, because if they're super interesting, you can't explain them in one sentence.
Yeah.
Right? So it's and by the way, I think you have to have compassion for people who take the risk of putting up money, millions of dollars,
yes,
was what it takes to make a film on the whole.
This is Toby Emmerich again.
Well, no, I'm just saying anybody anyone can understand why setting off into the unknown with a film when it doesn't fit a formula could be something that people are reluctant to do if their job is to make a profit making films, So it's always hard. In some sense, I would say today there may be more opportunity to tell eclectic stories, original stories, to bust apart the conventions of form than there's ever been. When you say, is it more difficult now? I think it's perhaps only more difficult if you're hung up on the idea of releasing it theatrically in the cinema.
Yes.
That format, it's as hard as ever, maybe harder to make these kinds of films.
Yeah. My dad's favourite film is Paint Your Wagon. No one mentions that film at all. But there was a point where you gave an interview back in 2010 where you at that point you said you were writing the film, but you didn't have a relationship with it as a director at that point. And that really stuck in my head, because I'm curious, at what point does that change? At what point do you decide that that's right for you, that you feel you're in a place where you can direct? Is it as simple as the writer stops, the director starts? Because I can't imagine it works that way.
I think it's more... The writer stops, the producer in a way kicks in and, well, should we take this to someone? Do I want to act in it and direct it? That could be tough on this one. Maybe I'd like to just focus on the performance. But, you go through sort of this conversation with yourself and your close collaborators, people like Toby Emmerich, the film executive who really supported this. And I came round to feeling that it was the weave of the story was so specific to my interests, and that I might as well just do it, And also at a certain point, like Toby and others invoked, like, look, like there's a lot of examples of films we all love where someone sort of authored it and just took it all the way through, Reds and Do the Right Thing and Woody Allen's films. You get inspired by people who have taken a big swing and made their own commentary in a way on America, looking at it, looking back to look at its character in some way. I really like those films. Even like Dances with Wolves, which. It's funny the way that sometimes with distance, like people look back on a thing and they'll start to reduce it to something more cliched than it actually was. That film to me it's quite political. That film,
yes,
it is a person looking back and saying this was an atrocity.
Yes.
Like, you know what I mean? That it's like a person saying we need to look back at this history and celebrate that. Take accountability for what happened, and it's romantic, and yet it's also like it's an elegy.
I remember Kevin Costner talking about that film. He said something not dissimilar to you, actually, that if someone really, really wants to get a film made, there will always be people who will push boulders up hills. It's just pushing that boulder just comes with all sorts of added challenges.
I'll tell you something else though too. Like when I think about that film. That was Costner, like, right in the dead center of where he's really great as a performer.
Yes.
But I think he understood that.
Yeah.
He understood that he felt deeply about the story and this is not narcissism, because he could see himself within it. It's like Joseph Campbell's thing about transparency. He identified with that character.
Yeah.
He felt it deeply.
Yeah.
And you can feel that he feels it deeply in his performance, because it's like one of his very best, you know? And I think that's true of Clint Eastwood in Unforgiven.
Yeah.
I think Unforgiven is
extraordinary.
Is a noir film, actually. It's a cowboy noir film because it basically says the West was not as heroic as we make it out to be.
Yeah.
And it's kind of amazing to have Clint at that age, who has been an iconic cowboy, go, hey, this was dark.
Yeah.
This was ugly. People shot each other in outhouses. It was not heroic. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and to have him doing that has resonance. He knew that. He knew that he uniquely brought a kind of toothiness to it. And I think, by the way, I think Warren Beatty's Reds. I think Spike Lee, Do the Right Thing. Spike knew what he was talking about. He knew who that character was. He made it. And I think if you feel a depth of connection to a thing, you know, it's at a certain point it's compelling to just say, let's just take this through and see it.
I saw it with Open Range as well, with Costner, which I think is the unspoken Costner film, which I think in its own way is quite extraordinary as well. I'm huge fan of that. One thing I love that you do, I'm reading lots of the interviews, and I think it's just you and Danny Boyle I've spoken to this year who do this. You've gone out of your way to talk about the writer. In your case, the writer,
yes, Jonathan Lethem.
But it feels like I don't know whether it's an overt decision on your part, but it feels like, because go back to Keeping the Faith, there's just one writer on it that I see. It just seems you strike me, appreciating you've written the screenplay for this one, as someone who hugely cherishes writers. Have I read that right?
Yeah, very much so. I think also in particular because I did something bold, in quotes, which is move the film into the 50s when in the novel it takes place in the 90s, and I've I've sent the detective of the novel off into a totally different story of inspired by kind of the events of New York in the 50s, which is not what the book is about. It's important to me that people understand that this is less of a departure from the core of the novel than one would think, because the novel is very much a character portrait of Lionel, and that is intact. That's Jonathan's. Most people's relationship with the book is the love of the intimacy you get with inside the mind of this character, and that I retained, with great fealty, and even to the degree of like the opening of the film is him telling you his story, just as it is in the book. And I think that Jonathan gets the credit for Jonathan deserves all the credit for what I would call the deep hook of empathy that you feel for this character. Like he recognized kind of the pain and the beauty within the condition, and he also recognized, I think, that we don't all have Tourette's. We are not crippled the way Lionel is in some ways, but we know what it's like to argue with our own head. We know the inside of our brain, and we know that it's more like that. The inside voices don't come out in all of us the way they do in Lionel, but we sure understand the idea of our brain being at war with our own brain. And that's a beautiful insight, and he created that character, and I think that's still the heart of the story.
Paul Hirsch has just written what I found, as an outsider looking in, to be a fascinating book on the film editing process. And I was thinking about this as I walked away from your film, trying to soak it in, because a couple of things that struck me. Number one, you treat your audience as intelligent. But number two, there's a real quality to the pacing. There's no rushing, there's just pacing. You can all less overt in there, I think. But what I was curious about is, what's your edit like? Because is it Joe Klotz is your editor?
On this one,
I've not heard you talk about the actual editing of the film. I find that process as equally fascinating as how you find that pace. How do you know when that pace is working? Because it's such a lovely slow burn tale that the temptation must be to rush it.
Although, ironically, it starts off with a big car chase, and and we know. And I said to Joe, we have to treat this like a James Bond pre-credit sequence. It's got to start off weird. What the hell is this character? Who is this? What is this whole situation? Wait, what is being said in this meeting? And then, oh my God, like something is going down and it's going bad and it goes like a freight train and suddenly, someone you do not expect to be dead is dead like 20 minutes into the film, not even. And that's so to me it was like started off with a bang, ratchet back, like then let it start to slow burn and then ratchet it up again. You know what I mean? I think that's the way I thought it should go.
And do you enjoy the editing? Is that?
Yeah, very much.
And I mean, is this? If I was in your shoes, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but this would be the least fun part of it for me. The actual having to go around and talk to people like me.
You've done something right if there's enough to talk about that it's interesting. Do you know what I mean? And also I will say it's always good signal too if across many conversations people are highlighting very different things about it. Because if it's refracting through people and you can feel that they're taking the different then that means there's enough room in it for people to find the things in it that are most compelling to them, and they're being provoked in different ways. Some people are saying how much they love the music. Some people are really looking at the resonance with modern political dynamics. Some people are really focused on sort of the empathy that they feel for him. All of that is good. To me, it's all good.
Yeah, and for you to make such an overtly New York film, for it to be able to travel and relate, and to find the hooks. I mean, there's universality in the elements in there as well. But I also have to ask, you've got one British element to this, Gugu Mbatha-Raw, and could you just talk about her? Because I remember when she first came on screen in Doctor Who. I don't know if you're a Doctor Who fan, but I just remember her spiking in that. And then she's built this extraordinary career, and I'm just curious, how did she come on your radar, and what did she bring?
I saw Belle. I saw that film Belle, which is she was lovely. And I saw she was in one of the better Black Mirror episodes. And then I saw Beyond the Lights, which she was terrific in as well. And she just, honestly, she just struck me as very talented, lovely, smart, kind of all the things I wanted Laura to be. But candidly, I also, people would throw past you the idea of this or that pop star, right? Who also may be a good actor. But Laura is a woman of mystery. She's a figure of mystery in the film. He wants to know more about her, and I wanted an actress that we want to know more about too, who we're not so familiar with in one way or another that we have all these presuppositions about what she's going to be like. I wanted it to be a constant unfolding of discovery, and Gugu's at that perfect moment in the career where I could both see her work and know that she's very good, but also know that a large majority of the audience won't know what to expect. You know what I mean? And I like that. I think that's really nice. But you're shortchanging other British contributions because we have my composer Daniel Pemberton is from here in London, and Tom York, of course, who wrote the ballad of the film, and Dick Pope, the great cinematographer of all Mike Leigh films and films that I did like The Illusionist, and he was one of my core collaborators on the whole thing.
Well, Dick Pope, I was just going to come to just on the lighting and look of the film, because one of the things that you've mentioned, I think it's about a month ago in an interview, you talked about the state of theatrical exhibition, and clearly the framing of some of the shots is just extraordinary. The light in them is just extraordinary. I'm just curious because news came in yesterday as we're recording this that the Justice Department in the US is relaxing rules on who can actually own movie theatres in the US, which I would imagine the way the world works will filter down to us at some point. Do you think that's quite healthy that the people who actually make the movies are now going to have a chance to own the theatres again, or do you just find that's not going to make an awful lot of difference?
It's complex. I think I'd have to learn more. The dynamics will have to be clarified a little bit. There were good reasons that they broke up. Yeah. In what we call antitrust, anti-monopoly. They broke up the producers and distributors of films from the exhibitors back in the day, because back in the day it created something negative, which was independent cinema couldn't get out. Yeah. Right. If you didn't own theaters, no one would you couldn't put them anywhere. So they have to work out, how does this not become anti-competitive, right? Yeah. How does this not reduce the number of films that we can see? Netflix, for instance, bought the billboard company that owns the billboards on Sunset Boulevard, and now there is nothing on there but Netflix films. And we have noticed that. People have noticed, like, wait a second, like, that's starting to feel a little monopolistic. What happens if a company like Disney owns so many theaters that you can't literally get anything but Pixar, Star Wars, things? I don't know. Yeah. I'm not saying I know. I'm saying there's questions within it. I think there's opportunity in that too, because obviously if you could have, there could be benefits to sort of the qualities of the presentation. I just don't know. It's very complex. That's very complex. It's probably above my pay grade.
It's certainly above mine. Edward Norton, thank you so much for your time, and congratulations on the film.
Thanks.
Thank you. And with that, our time came to an end. Motherless Brooklyn is in cinemas today. I do recommend you check it out. It's the kind of film that doesn't tend to make it to the big screen now, certainly not with a big studio behind it either. I will return shortly with the regular episode of the Film Stories podcast. In the meantime, if you can subscribe to this podcast, if you can leave nice reviews, that kind of thing helps me enormously. I'm a small independent publisher, and every bit of word of mouth is just gold dust. You can find me on Twitter at Simon Brew. You can find the podcast at Film Stories Pod. You'll find a whole bunch of exclusive video material over at youtube.com/Film Stories. You'll find us on Facebook too at facebook.com/Film Stories Online. Also, just as I'm recording this as well, the new issue of Film Stories magazine, which coincidentally includes a review of Motherless Brooklyn, is just on its way back from the printers. You'll be able to order a copy of that shortly from www.filmstories.co.uk. But for now, thank you as always for listening. I'll leave you in peace. I'll be back soon with a whole other bunch of film stories. You take care. Bye bye.